The latest on Brian Kelly aftermath at LSU. Who's on their wish list? Matt Moscona will join us and tell us who.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Gordy. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. And we are free and available wherever you get your podcast, now on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, broadcasting daily across Alabama, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And, of course, on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONCollege. Get $20 off your first purchase. All right, we are discussing the latest on the aftermath of LSU firing head coach Brian Kelly, and some more news happening yesterday as LSU officially fired their offensive coordinator, Joe Sloan. That news was shared by Pete Thamel on Monday morning. Sloan was in his second season as LSU's OC, his fourth year overall with the program. He was the quarterback's coach when Jaden Daniels was there and won the Heisman. LSU fired Brian Kelly on Sunday. Athletic Director Scott Woodward reportedly had a very tense meeting with Kelly over potential staff changes, and that included possibly moving on from Joe Sloan. LSU's offense been a major disappointment this season, ranking 77th nationally, 5.5 yards per play this season. Pete Thamel reported LSU will turn to tight ends coach Alex Atkins as their play caller for the rest of this year. He previously served as offense coordinator at Charlotte and Florida State. Of course, when he was at Florida State in 2023, that was the year the Noles went 13-0 and won the ACC title. So Alex Atkins will remain the tight ends coach, but will serve as the primary play caller. Tim Rattay will take over coaching the quarterbacks. So some LSU people say, what happens if the offense looks better? You know, what if Garrett Nussmeier starts playing up to more like he did last year? That certainly would be a great development for LSU the rest of the year. Cortez Hankton will reportedly maintain his current role as wide receivers coach, and Corday Hankton will take on an increased role with coaching the running backs, with Frank Wilson taking over interim head coaching responsibilities for the rest of the season. As for Brian Kelly, multiple sources confirming that Brian Kelly and LSU have not agreed on a buyout settlement just yet, but as Ross Dellinger reported, LSU will continue paying Kelly per his contract with a buyout resolution to be determined at a later date. Now, Scott Ballard, the chairman of the LSU Board of Supervisors, confirmed that Brian Kelly's buyout will be funded by self-generated athletic funds and private donors, saying there will be no impact on state education funds. He did say that the involvement of Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry, while he is an intense person, he is not making decisions or influencing contract details. And according to WDSU in New Orleans, multiple sources confirming to them that one private donor is expected to pay the lion's share of Brian Kelly's buyout. So no university programs or jobs or all that kind of stuff. They're not taking it from the state. It's going to be one private donor expected to pay the big bulk of that. See who it is. Was it Shaq? Todd Graves from Raising Cane's? I don't know. We'll find out. But that, so 50, is it going to be the full $53 million? Probably not. He's got the buyout clause where he's got to find another job. And if he gets a new job, that offsets what they owe him. So still more to come on that front. On the SEC circuit, Kirby Smart was asked by a reporter on Monday about LSU parting ways with Brian Kelly. Kirby saying, I think there's so much of it built around the playoffs. Everything is boom or bust, and you can't have a normal season. People got to make decisions earlier based on how someone does. I don't know enough about it, but I know there are high expectations. I coached at LSU, and a guy once told me, that is not your office. You're borrowing it. I knew right then, if you don't win, you won't be there long. I mean, the reality is Brian Kelly was in year 4 there. It's not like, that's where the overreaction comes. I mean, Billy Napier, how do you give up on him so quick? Brian Kelly, how do you give up on him so quick? Those guys were in year 4. Your program's got to be taking a major step forward by year 4. I think that's fair, especially at big-time programs like LSU and Florida. I don't think that's crazy. Now, again, if, Kentucky is firing their coach after year 4 because they're not making the playoff, yeah, that's unreasonable expectations. But for programs that have reasonable expectations of making the playoff once every 4 to 5 years, I think is fair for an LSU and a Florida. But amid all the chatter about the open jobs at LSU and Florida, Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin appearing on the Pat McAfee show on Monday, and he made it clear that money is not going to influence his future decision. He said, quote, "I've never made a decision off money, nor will I. I've seen too many examples in life where money does not buy happiness." He said he's aware his agent doesn't really like that. He said, quote, "Jimmy Sexton gets really mad when I say that." But Kiffin said for the time being, his focus is squarely on his current team. Ole Miss currently 7-1, 4-1 in the SEC, coming off a big road win at Oklahoma. Trinidad Chambliss having an awesome year. Some saying in the Heisman race. So, again, money will not be the reason if Lane Kiffin leaves. It'll be because he thinks he has a better opportunity elsewhere. And, money doesn't buy happiness, Lane Kiffin says. Now, college football analyst David Pollack, he said this week, LSU's opening goes right to the top of his list as far as best job open. And he said, Lane Kiffin, I think it's going to be very hard for him to say no to this job. I said I didn't think he would leave for Florida, but this is a different animal. I would make it harder for him to say no if I'm LSU. So obviously, it's going to be interesting. Ole Miss looks like a playoff team, right? It's 7-1. Not really a tough schedule remaining. If you're a playoff team, when does Lane, if he does decide to leave for LSU, when does he make that decision? Do they announce it? Does he finish out the playoff? Do they make an announcement, hey, I'm going to LSU, but I'm going to finish out the season with Ole Miss? Their division rival or, conference rival. Do they even want that? So let's take a look. The latest LSU head coaching odds. This is from one of the sports books out there. They've got John Sumrall from Tulane as the odds-on favorite as of Monday at plus 150. Joe Brady, the former LSU passing game coordinator who is the OC for the Buffalo Bills. They have him at plus 200. Lane Kiffin third on the list as far as odds-wise at plus 400. And rounding out the list for LSU, James Franklin, Eli Drinkwitz, Jeff Brom, Brent Key, and they put Jimbo Fisher on here at plus 1,800. I don't think LSU would bring back Jimbo Fisher, a former OC there many moons ago. How about the latest Florida head coaching odds? This was updated as of Monday as well. Eli Drinkwitz, now the favorite to land the Florida job at minus 105. That's pretty... they're really thinking Eli Drinkwitz is going to be he's really going to be considered for the Florida job, and certainly can't blame him. That's a big-time program if he were to leave Mizzou. They have James Franklin with the second best odds at plus 200, Lane Kiffin with the third best odds at plus 300, Jed Fish, Jeff Brom, Alex Golish, and Brent Key on that list. So Lane Kiffin kind of odds-wise, the third best odds at LSU and Florida. So right now, the betting odds are Lane's not going anywhere. He's staying at Ole Miss. Will that be the case? We will see. And I wanted to throw this up. Andy Staples over at On3, he listed the best available college football jobs out there. He lists LSU number 1 and Florida number 2 on his list. He's got Penn State 3, he's got Arkansas 4. So 3 of the open jobs in the SEC, 3 of the top 4 best openings, according to Andy Staples on his list. So, yeah, I think it's pretty consensus. LSU and Florida. Would there have been a time where maybe Florida even would have been ahead of LSU? Probably. But, the appeal with LSU is always recruiting and in-state, and you don't compete with anybody else for recruiting. So that is that. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we're going to be joined by Matt Moscona, host of Locked On LSU. We'll talk with him about the latest happening in Baton Rouge. That's coming your way here in just a second. Hey, but first, guys, the NBA is back. No better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of a game and you want to ride a hot hand, FanDuel, they have live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. They got all the college action. They got NFL. They got all the games that you want to get in on the action, and it keeps every game exciting over at FanDuel, especially when your team is making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is taking care of their customers, giving new customers, if you've never signed up a FanDuel before, you can get that $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So just head to FanDuel.com, sign up today, play your game with FanDuel. They are the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, thank you guys for making a Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. Keep going back and checking us out each and every day. We'll be talking more and more on some of these open SEC jobs and who will be landing them. We'll also give you some updated news around the conference coming up in the next segment. But let's jump into it as our guy Matt Moscona from Locked On LSU joins us now on the phone. And Scone, let's just jump right into it. The Brian Kelly firing, we heard a week ago that reports said there was, quote, no appetite to pay his massive buyout after the loss at Vanderbilt with the embarrassing home loss to Texas A&M. That kind of appeared to be the final nail in his coffin.
To clarify, I haven't said that for a week. I've said that for 4 years. And that's not an opinion that I held. That's the belief that was shared with me by the people who would actually write checks and make the decisions. While it's not a poverty program, LSU is also not a wealthy university. Athletic department. Louisiana is not a wealthy state. So the idea of spending $50+ million to pay a coach not to work is not something that has been considered feasible. And guys, look, I was in Nashville 2 Saturdays ago when LSU played Vanderbilt. And that was the LSU Board of Supervisors trip. They do this once a year, the board, they wear their gaudy purple blazers and they go have a board dinner the Friday night before the game. And then, they're all in the field before the game or whatever. So, understand all of the power brokers, decision makers were there in Nashville. And even after that loss to Vanderbilt, some conversations I had was still that there was no appetite to fire Brian Kelly, both close road losses against top 10 teams. And that's not a fireable offense. So all that preamble to say, walking into that game Saturday against Texas A&M, it was not in my or I think anyone's consciousness that Brian Kelly would be fired if they lost that game. The manner in which they lost, how it played out, the fan revolt of sorts, I can only assume that they reached a point where they felt like there was no coming back from something like that in a season where they were all in. And so during the game, I'm told conversations started to be had casually about buyout. There was enough support for it, and they were able to move forward on Sunday.
Matt, I had somebody from the outside say, wait, Brian Kelly's 3 losses this year are the top 10 teams currently. You go back the past 3 seasons, and Kelly only lost to one unranked team at LSU. That was the last year at Florida, at least the last 3 seasons. But it's all about expectations, right? This was supposed to be that big year with the loaded NIL roster that cost $17 million. You bring back Garrett Nussmeier, a big-time passer from last year, and it was playoffs or bust in year 4 for Brian Kelly. So, in my opinion, that's why Brian Kelly is no longer the LSU coach, because of failing those massive expectations this year, right?
Yeah. I think expectations largely gauge all of these decisions and conversations, Chris. That's within any program. At LSU, where you came into this season, preseason top 10, year 4 under Brian Kelly. You mentioned you returned Garrett Nussmeier, who was the leading returning passer in college football. In the offseason, there was this big plea to LSU supporters to fund the collective to be able to spend more in NIL. They obliged. By the way, Brian Kelly did also. Remember, he did $1 million match where he put up $1 million of his own money to be contributed toward this roster last offseason. So he put his money where his mouth is. But all of that bred enormous expectation. And then when they beat Clemson in the opener, that only grew. And the frustration with the offense to this point, and obviously to be at 3 losses before November, and then to have Saturday night play out the way it did, they would have had to win out to finish 10-2 and make the playoffs. So in theory, with your season on the line, to lay down in the second half and be so thoroughly dominated the way they were was just alarming to a lot of people. I still think this is extremely reactionary. to make this type of decision, because it's not just the $54 million they're going to have to pay Brian Kelly. They're going to have to buy out his staff. They're going to have to hire a new head coach, a new staff. And you're talking about, as it was estimated to me yesterday by one prominent LSU booster, they're talking the neighborhood of $100 to $115 million all in to make this change. And that's not couch cushion money for LSU. So that's why yesterday the governor of the state was involved, the board of supervisors was involved, high-level boosters were involved in meetings. This was a very, very odd situation, how it all played out in the manner which it did.
LSU athletic director Scott Woodward, he was at Texas A&M, of course, made the monster hire of Jimbo Fisher years back. That turned out to be a disaster. And then this one with Brian Kelly at LSU, both massive contracts handed out to both those guys. So with those two misses, I mean, I got to think, is it going to be the other big money people at LSU saying, hey, we're going to make this decision instead of Scott Woodward? Could that be how this plays out?
I don't think it's necessarily that, but I also don't think Scott Woodward is going to make this hire. Louisiana is weird, man. This is a weird political culture. Like, we still have the Napoleonic Code, and it's, right now LSU is going through a weird transitional phase where they're in the process of hiring a new university president. And remember, the athletic director can be hired or fired by the president. Well, there's an interim president right now. Well, that new president is going to be effectively rubber stamped by the board of supervisors appointed by the governor. So really the governor is the one who's going to make this hire, this decision for a new athletic director, which I believe will, new president, which I believe will be new athletic director. So the question, though, guys, with this timeline, if you're following, is, I don't know that LSU is going to have a new university president in place before they make a football hire. And if the university president's not in place, I don't think they'll make an AD change before a football hire as well. But if they don't want Scott Woodward to make the hire, who's making the hire? So I think you could look at a situation where, whatever is done will probably have some influence from the governor's office as well, which is just wild to think that we're at a position where you hire an athletic director and that person isn't given the autonomy to do his or her job. But that's what it is. For Scott, look, man, I think people highlight the Jimbo and Brian Kelly contracts. What I'd also point out about A&M is the contract that he gave Jimbo wasn't the problem. The problem was when the next athletic director gave Jimbo the extension after the COVID year. And the Brian Kelly contract never seemed outlandish until you have this reactionary firing after this loss. So I look, he also hired Jay Johnson, who's won 2 baseball national titles, which is a big deal here. He hired Kim Mulkey, who obviously has won a women's basketball title. He's been actually an outstanding athletic director. But I understand, and I think most do, you're judged by your football hires. And this one went belly up.
Talking with Matt Moscona from Locked On LSU. Matt, where does LSU go from here? Some top targets out there. Lane Kiffin. Some have joked, look, you call Nick Saban, make him tell you no. I look back to A&M when they bought out Jimbo and they were in the same boat. They went and got the Duke coach, Mike Elko, who I believe coming into the season was the number 32 highest paid coach in college football. So does LSU go that route, or maybe you go, cheaper with the up and comer, or do you go spend big on that big fish potentially out there?
And if it was Scott Woodward making the hire, we know Scott's MO. He's going to go look for the biggest name possible. Not knowing who's making the hire, it's really hard to accurately answer that. What I could tell you is the Lane Kiffin thing is interesting. There's some sentiment that, that he would crawl to Baton Rouge. I don't know if that's true. I can't tell you that I know anything about what Lane Kiffin's thinking. He's having success at Ole Miss, seems very happy. And in this era, if you have financial buy-in, you can win anywhere. I mean, Indiana's the number. Look at Indiana, Georgia Tech, Vanderbilt are all in the top 10 right now. I mean, you can win if you have financial buy-in. So I don't know that he necessarily needs to leave Ole Miss to win a championship, which I wouldn't have said even 3-4 years ago. You're going to hear the other names: Dan Lanning, Eli Drinkwitz, and a couple of often the radar names that you may want to consider just with LSU or Louisiana ties. I've heard Joe Brady mentioned as maybe a person of interest. He's the OC for the Bills now. Of course, he was on staff for LSU in 2019. And maybe a wild card, I'd tell you, is Kelvin Shepard. Played linebacker at LSU. He's currently the defensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. And I think there might be an appetite to have someone with NFL experience, just considering how things are structured now, where you have a general manager that is going to manage money in the roster by and large, and the head coach is going to assemble a staff that's going to coach the roster. So player-friendly coaches that have that sort of model of experience might be more of a lean, as opposed to the older school coaches who have always had a lean on high school recruiting, as we see, man. Saban, Dabo, Brian Kelly, Mike Gundy. Just look at the list of transition in this era, and I think that's probably a good indicator of the type of coach you might want to avoid in this hire.
Yeah, that is Matt Moscona, Locked On LSU. Check him out. Appreciate him taking some time out to join us. Coming up next, we will get you caught up on some of the other big news we haven't touched on going on around the conference. I want to remind you guys, of course, today's episode brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. College football is back, and of course, plenty of great ways to get into the stadium to go see your favorite team. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping up at checkout. That's why we use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. You're going to pull up the Game Time app. In just a couple of taps, you're going to see amazing deals. Talking your favorite college football games as low as $25. The app makes it super simple. You can see the exact view from your seat before buying. It's faster, it's cheaper, less stressful than any other way you're going to buy tickets. Go take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. You can download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONCollege, get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that is promo code LOCKEDONCollege, $20 off if you've never used them before. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. All right, we're along here, Locked On SEC. Appreciate Matt Moscona for taking some time out to join us. Let's get into the other news going on around the conference, and we got to start over in Austin. As Steve Sarkisian gave an update on Arch Manning ahead of their game against Vanderbilt, the number 20 Texas Longhorns. Massive comeback win over Mississippi State over in Starkville this past weekend. Of course, late in the game, Arch Manning in overtime, leaving the game with what appeared to be a concussion. Pete Thamel, according to Pete Thamel, Longhorns head coach Steve Sarkisian telling the media Monday in his presser that Arch did not practice Monday, is currently in concussion protocol. So if Manning is unable to pass the concussion protocol by this Saturday, Arch will miss the big game against top 10 Vanderbilt. And they will have to go with backup quarterback Matthew Caldwell. Now, Caldwell did come in for Manning in the overtime and threw the game winner, or the go-ahead touchdown in overtime. And comes over from Troy, former quarterback Troy Trojan, and now may be called upon to sub for Arch Manning against Vanderbilt. As one Longhorn fan I joked with earlier today, I said, what happens if Caldwell goes out and throws for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns? Is he Wally Pip Arch? I don't think that'll be the case, but will be certainly something to keep an eye on. How about over at Auburn? Hugh Freeze and Auburn picking up a big win over Arkansas this past week. Much needed win for him. Hugh Freeze asked about his job security, meeting with reporters on Monday. He said, I've been here just short of 3 years. Is the program better than when I got here on the roster? Yes. Are we close? Yes. I've won everywhere I've been, and I believe with all my heart that we are going to win big here. Jackson Arnold, of course, not he's been up and down this year, and they are getting ready for their game against Kentucky. Of course, they made a quarterback change this past week, so will they go with Ashton Daniels or will they go back to Jackson Arnold? We will find out. But yeah, poor Hugh Freeze, man. He is he's still hanging on by a thread there over at Auburn. How about Lane Kiffin? He is calling out his fans over there in Oxford, saying that they're going to need the fans to sell out Vaught Hemingway Stadium for the South Carolina game. He said, I hope our fans have a lot of energy, create a really great atmosphere. We have all wanted night SEC games here, and we finally have one. Really hope we would be able to sell this game out. They told me it isn't sold out. I think that would mean a lot to our players that we can be 7-1 and have our stadium be sold out. Ooh, some interesting, a little dig there maybe. Hey, guys, we're 7-1. Wake the hell up. Maybe you didn't notice. There's other teams that are calling on me. You don't come support me, I might go elsewhere. He didn't say that, but reading between the lines. All right, the SEC did announce some individual honors for Week 9. Texas A&M quarterback Marcel Reed listed as the Offensive Player of the Week for his big win over LSU. On defense, it was Auburn linebacker Xavier Atkins and Texas linebacker Anthony Hill, both sharing that honor. Auburn kicker Alex McPherson earned special team honors, going perfect 6 for 6 on field goals, tying an SEC single game record to lift Auburn over. Arkansas in the trenches, Tennessee's Lance Hurd and Ole Miss's Diego Pounds. They were named co-offensive lineman of the week. And Texas Edge Ethan Burke and Texas A&M's Cassius Howell, they were sharing defensive line honors, with each of them coming up with big sacks in their team's wins. We're rounding out the list. Freshman of the week, Ole Miss wide receiver Winston Watkins. Fantastic performance, 111-yard breakout performance for the Rebels in the win over Oklahoma. There you have it. That is going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Reminder, you can check us out simulcast daily on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. For any of our listeners who live in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, you can catch us weekdays at 11:30 a.m. Central on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, home of the New Orleans Pelicans and home for Locked On SEC. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. Everybody have a great day. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.